Hey YouTubers, my name is Doug. I'm a software engineer. Outside of that, I like to build stuff. I just got my new Dewalt circular saw on Amazon, so I thought I'd make a video about circular saws. So technically the term circular saw is used to refer to any saw with a circular blade. There are several types of saws that fit into that category, such as your miter saw and your table saw. Today I'm talking about portable circular saws, which is what I'm holding right here. The portable circular saw was originally manufactured by a company called Skilsaw. One of the more popular models was the Skilsaw Model 77, which is still used on construction sites today. The brand Skill still manufactures circular saws. They manufacture hobbyist circular saws like the one I'm holding right here, which is my old one. There are a couple of important pieces of information to keep in mind when buying a portable electric saw. Number one, you want to make sure you get a blade big enough to cut the maximum depth that you'll encounter, even when the blade is tilted at a full 45 degrees. You also want to make sure that the motor is powerful enough to turn the blade under all conditions. This saw has a 7¼ inch blade, which should be able to cut a 2x4 even when it's angled at 45 degrees. If you have larger materials to work with, you might want to get a 7½ or 8 inch blade. The first time you get a circular saw, it's going to come with a blade that's not installed, so I'm going to show you how to install the blade for the first time. 99% of these portable circular saws are going to come with this little wrench that is installed somewhere on the foot plate. So the first thing you're going to do is take out this little wrench. Every portable circular saw is going to have this little bolt right here, and then behind that, this clamping washer. So this may or may not be already installed when you first get your circular saw, but if it is, we'll just use this wrench to loosen it. Mine's already loose enough where I can unscrew it by hand, so I'm going to do that. I've got the bolt off, and then I can take the washer off of this spindle in the middle. So I'll set these two pieces down. And then I'm going to retract this blade guard. I'm just going to hold it in place while I put the blade up through the foot plate and over the spindle. So your saw is going to have all these arrows on the outside of it, at least one arrow telling you the direction of rotation. So this rotation is counterclockwise. The blade also has arrows telling me what direction it's rotating. So as long as I match those up, I'm good. Then I'll put this clamping washer back on. And then I'm going to put my bolt back in there. I'm going to tighten it by hand until I get it to where I can't tighten it anymore. At this point I can't tighten it by hand anymore, so I'm going to have to use this wrench. But before I do that, I want to show you up at the top of your circular saw there's going to be this blade lock. And what this does is when you wiggle the blade, you'll be able to depress the blade lock and effectively stop the blade from rotating. What you'll do is you'll just turn this a little bit. The blade will start turning with the bolt, so the bolt can't tighten. So as I'm turning, I'll depress this blade lock. That'll stop the blade from turning while I tighten it. Now you never want to over tighten this bolt, so I just gave it a good couple degrees of rotation and I stopped when it felt secure. You can put this little wrench back under here for storage. So I'm going to talk a little bit about safety when using a circular saw. Some of this is going to be pretty self-explanatory. Obviously you don't want to reach underneath the workpiece, so when your blade's going, potentially it could be going through a piece of material. You don't want to reach your hand underneath there. You generally just don't want your hand to touch the blade at all while it's in operation. There are two places where you should be gripping the saw at all times. That's this handle right here, where the trigger is located, and then there's an auxiliary handle here for your other hand. As long as your hands are in these two positions, you can't really touch the blade. You also don't want to try to hold the material that you're cutting through with one hand. If you're doing some kind of a rip cut, always try to use a rip fence or use some kind of straight edge as a guide. Obviously, don't use the saw if there's any broken parts like the bolt or this washer, bad dull blade. It's important that you grip the saw firmly. There's such a thing as kickback. That's where your blade binds with the material that you're cutting through, and it can give you a little jolt. But you want to hold the saw firmly so that you react to those jolts appropriately. For obvious reasons, eye protection is important. Alright, so I'm all set up to test the tool for the first time. I've got my safety goggles, and put those on. I've got a 2x4 clamped to my workbench. I'm just going to draw a line, see how closely I can follow it. If you look closely at the foot plate of this saw, there's some measurements on it that tell you how far from the blade the left edge of the foot plate is and how far away the right edge is. There's also some guidelines that show you this is exactly where the blade is when the bevel is set to 0 degrees. So when I'm making my cut, I'm just going to try to keep the line right to the right of this little notch here. So now I'm going to demonstrate making a beveled cut. And right now I have the saw cutting at a 0 degree angle, perpendicular with the surface of the material I'm cutting. If I want to make an adjustment, the bevel mechanism is up here at the front of the saw. There's a lever that unlocks the foot plate, and here's the pointer that shows you what angle you're cutting at. So I'll just loosen this lever, and I'm then able to adjust the foot plate to whatever angle I want. Looks like my maximum here is 55 degrees. I'm going to actually set it back to 45. It sort of clicks into place there at 45. So I'm going to just tighten the lever. So what I've done here is adjusted the foot plate such that the blade will pass through my material at a 45 degree angle. Now when I'm cutting at a 45 degree angle, I'm going to want my line to pass through this little notch right here, marked as 45. Alright, so here's my beveled cut. These are the two faces. Put them together. Should have a 90 degree angle. I can go ahead and measure that with the square. So as you can see, it made a pretty decent 45 degree cut. Now again, when you want to adjust the angle at which you're cutting through material, what you're doing is you're adjusting the foot plate. And so this lever here is going to allow me to set it back to 0. Another thing that you'll want to do from time to time is adjust the depth of your cut. That's going to be another adjustment of the foot plate in relation to the blade. Back here there's a lever that in the down position is keeping the foot plate locked. If I lift it up, it'll loosen and allow me to move the foot plate freely. You'll probably use the material itself or some kind of measuring tool to determine how far down the foot plate should go in relation to the bottom of the blade. But once you have that position determined, you'll pull this lever down again and lock it into place. In general, you don't need the blade to extend much further down than the thickness of the material that you're cutting. It was really easy to make all the adjustments I made today. The grips felt really strong and comfortable. I wasn't precisely on the line with my first cut. That'll take some getting used to. I really enjoyed using the Dewalt for the first time today. Compared to my skill that I've had for 5 or 6 years, this one felt really powerful. It's definitely going to be my go-to circular saw from here on out. The portable circular. The portable circular saw. Quiet, please.